Thank you very much for agreeing to join us for our Newconomy panel discussion. I appreciate you all being here. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce first John Light. John, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're working on right now?
Yeah, so I work on the community team for a project called Eragon, and we are building governance tools for organizations and open source projects. And it's an Ethereum-based project, and currently it's on testnet, but we're going to be moving the smart contracts over to mainnet very soon. I also co-founded a project called Bitseed, and we build and sell plug and play Bitcoin full nodes.
Awesome. So that's a lot of technical jargon there. So if you're going to explain this to someone who had no background in this forum, how would you explain what you do and what Eragon is?
Yeah, so you could think of Eragon as like a Delaware for the blockchain, meaning that Delaware is a well-known jurisdiction for incorporating companies in the traditional legal system. Eragon is a way, using Eragon, you can actually create an organization that is native to the Ethereum blockchain. So all of your organizational processes and governance processes can run on Ethereum.
Cool. And what is Bitseed exactly?
And Bitseed it's a small computer about the size of a CD case that runs the Bitcoin core software, which is the main software implementation of the Bitcoin protocol. So it stores a full copy of the blockchain and also shares copies of that blockchain with other computers in the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin full nodes are essentially the backbone of the Bitcoin network. You need full nodes in order for the network to exist.
Very cool. Thank you, John. Cassidy, tell us a little bit about what you do. Cassidy Daly, you're token economy valuation and crypto asset management expert. So tell us what that is and what you do.
Well, I guess I'll start with my background because that will help understand what I do a little bit more. So I actually studied economics and I worked briefly at the Fed. So my focus was really central banking. So I came into blockchain from that context, but I just kind of fell into an opportunity to start a project. And I started a company called Clue. CHLU. It's a reputation protocol. And I'm still working on that. But while working with that company, realized that what my real interest was in tokens and token design. So I've also started consulting on the side with various other companies. And right now I'm working with a company called Centrifuge, which I would say is an operating system for the financial supply chain.
Okay, and again, in layman's terms, if you had to explain this to your mom or your grandmother, how would you explain what you do and sort of what you're involved in?
So I would say that that first company, it was really just trying to give the power of ratings and reviews, reputation online to the person who we think should own it, which is you. So if you are a restaurant, instead of Yelp owning all of your reviews and you having no ability to go to any other platform with those same reviews, now we're going to save it in a way that you will have full access and control over it and can take it with you wherever you'd like. But while I was working on how to make that work, I realized that that's really what I like, is figuring out how to make these systems work in a way that you have an incentive to actually use my product and get it going. In the case of Centrifuge, so what a financial supply chain is the finances of the supply chain. So when Pepsi pays their suppliers, oftentimes they wait 60 to 90 days to actually pay them. And it ends up being a real big problem for the little guys who don't really have any liquidity. They can't go to a bank and just ask for a loan if they can't really prove that they're working with someone like Pepsi and they've been working with them for 10 years. And oftentimes companies just don't end up having that kind of data. So what this company is doing is putting all of the invoices on the blockchain so that you have a permanent and uncontestable history of all of that data. And then that can open up more financial possibilities to these companies. So what I'm doing for them is coming up with a system to actually make that work. So I would call that token design. You could call it crypto economics, token economics. There are many terms. They're all slightly different in what they refer to, but it's all basically the same. I guess I would say it's just system design, designing a way and like a mechanism and incentives to make the whole system work.
Very cool. So is there anything specifically that you're working on right now that you're excited about with what you're doing?
I think I'm trying to understand more fine-grained detail than, I wouldn't say than people have put thought into, because I'm sure lots of people have put thought into these things. But I guess just for an example, I'm doing an event on inflation in November. And I think that's a concept that people end up getting lost on. I think they talk about things like the supply of tokens, but it's actually not the same thing as inflation. And you can use the supply to affect inflation, but inflation itself is something much harder to control. And I think it's a concept that's actually maybe underutilized in some crypto networks. So excited to dive into that a little bit more.
Thank you, Cassidy. And so Craig, so again, if you could just explain in layman's terms, DStock.
Absolutely. So DStock, we're a licensed stock exchange for trading essentially of security tokens, and we're an end-to-end solution for security token industry where we do both tokenization of assets as well as a trading platform for those security tokens. And we have a quite strong focus also on emerging markets. We're trying to make it easier for people all over the world to raise money, especially where there's a lack of financial infrastructure. And we do that all on chain. So basically, on our platform, you can use cryptocurrencies to invest in real world assets.
Very cool. And so you are a decentralized exchange. What makes that different from everything else?
Well, I think what we're going to see in the future is more and more decentralized exchanges popping up. And really the key elements of it are, first of all, security. So we never hold our customers' funds. As a customer of our platform, you're always in control of your own money. I can never do anything with it without you basically initiating a transaction. And what that means is that hackers, if they try and hack my platform, they can't actually steal your funds because I never have your funds. So you have an inherent security that's much stronger with a decentralized exchange, and it's a trustless system. If you look at traditional crypto exchanges, when you trade on them, there's actually nothing on the blockchain happening. It's literally just trades happening in a database in the server of a crypto exchange. Whereas on a decentralized exchange, all of the trading is happening directly on chain. You can see all of the transactions, and you don't have to trust the exchange itself. You can trust in the blockchain, which is one of the key ideologies behind blockchain in the first place.
Very cool. So how is DStock different from any of its competitors?
So a lot of the competitors or a lot of the companies in the security token space are looking just at tokenization. So they're looking just at taking, for example, a fund or maybe a company that's raising money and they want to create a security token. What is not really happening and hasn't yet come into the space is an actual trading platform, an actual exchange where you can trade these security tokens. And so we believe we're going to be the first to actually launch that. Our platform is currently on testnet. It's built on top of Stellar, and we've got a proof of concept that's up and running on the Stellar testnet with our product coming out in a few months' time. And when it does come out, we'll be the first exchange that's actually trading security tokens, plus we're a licensed entity, which is something that a lot of the other people that are competitors in the space haven't yet done. So we basically got a license that we obtained in January of this year. A lot of competitors are only beginning that licensing process, which can take up to 2 years. And that's one of our key competitive advantages.
It's exciting. So I'm going to throw this out to all three of you. So the state of our new economy, and that's basically what we're named after: Newconomy, the new economy, the new financial technology revolution. I mean, last year was huge. 2017, we saw a lot of interest from just everyone, and then it sort of waned a bit in 2018. Although it's been less volatile, I would say, with just Bitcoin itself. But what are your thoughts on where we are and where we're going? Let's say John.
I saw 2017 and had flashbacks to 2013 because the situation was very similar in the way that there was a buildup and a wave of hype throughout the year that peaked towards the end of the year, and then reality, called and said, hey, these valuations are way overblown. And so, of course, when traders are making 10, 20, 50, 100x on their investments, they're going to start taking profits, and that's going to bring down the price. And the people just getting into the market can't possibly support those overinflated valuations. So it was really just exuberance followed by a correction. But where we landed in terms of the market is still, in most cases, 5 to 10x higher than it was at the start of 2017. If you just look at the price of Bitcoin, for example. And so that shows real growth that happened throughout the year, significant growth. We wouldn't look at a traditional Fortune 500 asset that goes up 500% and say, man, that's a terrible market to be in. Really, it's incredible how much just the economy itself has grown over the past couple of years. But then when you actually look at the ecosystem and the development that's happening on the technology and liquidity side of things, there's also been tremendous progress made there. So overall, I'm extremely happy about where we're at and super optimistic for the future. Far from being dead, crypto is stronger than ever.
Awesome. Cassidy, how about you? What are your thoughts where we are and where we're going?
Well, I guess I would say that it was definitely a part of a hype cycle, what happened this past year, but I think that's actually really important for growing fields, growing economies. And I think although a lot of it was speculation, it's important that the space got that much attention because it got people talking about it. And I think it's actually taken a lot of pressure off of the people working in the space to have the price go down this year. So I think this Biddle group has been able to really focus and just work instead of worrying about price fluctuations day to day. And I mean, to me, it kind of hit home when my dad came to me and he said at work, his friends are talking about Bitcoin and they started pulling up the market on their screens. And I'm thinking, wow, my dad's talking about this. And I didn't even push him on it, right? He's just coming to me naturally, starting to ask about this space and asking curious questions. And that to me is, okay, there's people around the world who are becoming aware of this. They might not know exactly what the whole space can do for them yet, but I think that's what we're working on this year. And I would say myself, definitely, but lots of other projects in the space are getting licenses, getting certifications to be real businesses and actually get products running that can help people in a way that they might not even need to know what blockchain is to be able to use that product.
Awesome. So, Craig, where do you think we're going? What's next?
I think, like the others, that there was a bit of frenzied activity in the last few years. I was also around in the industry in 2013, and just like any other industry, the cycles, there's ups and downs. And certainly in the last 6 months or so, we've been in a down. And I think it was a correction that was much needed. I believe, in my personal opinion, that last year projects were raising far too much money, actually to the point where people are kind of disincentivized to actually launch a product, because if you raised $100 million, $200 million for a product with a white paper, what incentive is there to actually launch a product? And I think that now that the market is corrected, it's good for the industry overall, it's good for the technology, because people are now incentivized to actually deliver. And if you look last year and the year before at roadmaps on white papers, on ICOs that were coming out, 2018 was always going to be the year where products needed to get delivered. And what we've seen is not that much delivery as of yet. And I think that's also in part the reason why we're seeing declines in prices. And I believe that what we're left with is basically the real projects that are focusing, like Cassidy said, very much on actually building, bringing something to market, driving mass adoption, driving consumers, actual use cases. And I think it's in these tough times where the real projects stand out and where the fluff will ultimately start to fail. Not everything can succeed. And I think that what we've also seen was a significant amount of money raised for projects in the forms of utility tokens. And I do think that the natural progression will be towards security tokens, which is very much where my company is playing. And along those ends, it's good because it gives investors ultimately different options. I think there's certainly some very good use cases for utility tokens, but there's also really interesting ones for security tokens. Some people who are investors want a bit more protection.
Sorry.
No worries.
Go ahead.
Some investors in this space want more protection. And I think as we start to see these new asset classes emerging, where young companies in the blockchain space raise money in the form of an STO, and they can get investment directly into equity of their companies. It's also a fantastic way for new, fresh money to come into the industry from big institutions that want direct exposure into companies, not necessarily just utility in companies. So overall, I think what we're seeing is the industry maturing. And part of that maturing is prices declining and new types of assets emerging.
Very cool. So, so John, just in this whole industry, is there anyone that you kind of look up to, or someone in the crypto world that you think this is a really interesting person, or this is a really interesting project that they're running right now, besides Eragon?
Well, I do have to say, more than an individual or a specific project, I have a lot of respect for people who are focused on building, and people who are focused on really actually applying this technology to help solve real world problems. You know, hype has its place, but I think it has a very limited place versus just getting your hands dirty and doing the work that needs to get done to realize the shared vision that we have for using this technology to improve the world around us and you know, the larger world, but also our local communities. And so to the builders, I say thank you.
So what example of a real world problem could this technology solve?
Well, one particularly pertinent example that comes up a lot is using cryptocurrency as a hedge against hyperinflation. For example, in Venezuela, where the inflation rate is reaching over 1,000,000%, which is an obscenely high number compared to the 3% on average inflation that modern Western economies have today. And so people in Venezuela are using Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to literally save their lives, not only to protect their savings, but also to purchase critical supplies like medicine and food to take care of themselves and their families. And this is one of the most, I think, important kinds of uses of cryptocurrency that we have seen in practice in the real world today.
That's awesome. Cassidy, how about you? Is there any particular aspect of this technology or person that you or company or project that you're looking at that you're really excited about, or you think that's, they're doing a great job?
I guess I would say that although the technology can be used for lots of different things, it is still the financial component of it that I think will make the most impact potentially, at least in the short term. So to speak to that, I would say MakerDAO has done phenomenally in the last year, just in terms of the amount of activity on their platform. I think it was something, actually, I'm not going to say the number because I don't remember it. But I was surprised when I saw it. I remember that feeling. And I would say decentralized exchanges definitely go into that as well, because working with Centrifuge, our hope in that project is that people will be able to go to these decentralized exchanges and lend against themselves with something like an invoice that's really worth something. But they don't have to rely on some other party, some bank, to finance that with their own recipe. They can actually go to some provider to get a risk assessment that's just a risk assessment, but then all of the lending can take place by themselves. And I think that, to me, is a really cool concept, that you could have some coffee farmer in Costa Rica who's using this technology to give himself money, to give himself that liquidity that no bank was able to provide. And I think it's those financial uses of this blockchain technology that seem the most interesting to me right now.
Awesome. And then speaking of decentralized exchanges, Craig?
Yeah, thanks, John and Cassidy. That was the perfect setup, pretty much. I totally agree with John in terms of using crypto as a hedge against inflation. I'm actually from South Africa, and there's relatively high levels of inflation there. And just next door, our neighbors, Zimbabwe, have gone through the most insane hyperinflation ever historically. And I understand exactly that, as well as the Venezuelan example, Argentina, Turkey, similarly at the moment going through a similar dynamic. And in all of those environments, it's a really tough way to live, where you literally have so much inflation that you may leave your house in the morning on the way to the shops, and by the time you get there, the goods you're going to purchase cost more than they did when you left your home. That's how extreme it can get. And for people like that, crypto is actually an amazing use case, whether it's stable coins or security tokens or just underlying crypto itself. I think that one of the big issues that blockchain as a technology can be used for in those environments is giving people a way to actually diversify their wealth, whether it's into crypto or some investment product or some form of stable asset that isn't their local currency and isn't controlled by a government that may have made some political mistakes. And that's where I think security tokens are super useful. Also, when it comes to stable coins, I think they're an interesting use case, but a lot of them, MakerDAO included, actually have, in my opinion, some flaws in the way that they are constructed from a financial theory perspective, as well as a economic perspective, but we don't have to get too deep into that. But yeah, I agree with the others that those are really interesting use cases. And I do think that, again, to the point of the industry maturing, what we saw in the past, in my opinion, was companies that looked at blockchain technology and tried to find some sort of problem it could solve. And I think what we're seeing now is more mature companies coming in and saying, here's a problem I see in the world. Is blockchain technology a good piece of technology to actually solve that problem? And the companies that take that approach, I think those are going to be the sustainable ones that actually are able to scale their businesses ultimately. And we're seeing more and more of that happening. So in terms of who I look up to in the space, it's projects that have that approach.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, guys. I appreciate all of your time, and we're probably going to do this again at some point, maybe even with a larger panel. So we'd love to have you back, and really thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Cassidy. Thank you, Craig. And I appreciate you being with us.
Excellent. Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Have a great evening.
Bye.
Wherever you are.